The massive alien ship floated in the darkness of space like a metal mountain. Its hull was black and covered with sharp spikes that looked like teeth. Inside the ship, hundreds of alien warriors gathered in a huge room. They were called Keltharians, and they looked like giant insects walking on two legs. Their skin was hard like armor, and they had 4 glowing red eyes and sharp claws for hands. At the front of the room stood their leader, Supreme Commander Vexthar. He was bigger than the others, with scars covering his face and arms. His claws clicked together as he spoke to his warriors. "My brothers," Vexthar said in a deep, angry voice, "for 1,000 years we have been forced to live in peace. 1,000 years, we are warriors. We are hunters. We are meant to fight and conquer, not sit in our ships doing nothing." The other aliens made clicking sounds with their mouths, showing they agreed with their leader. Some hit their claws against the metal walls, making loud banging noises. "The galaxy has forgotten why they should fear us," Vexthar continued. "Today we will remind them. Today we choose our first target for conquest." A large screen appeared in the air above them. It showed a small blue planet with white clouds swirling around it. The aliens had been watching this planet for months, studying the creatures that lived there. Humans, Vexthar said the word like it tasted bad. They are weak. They are soft. During the peace they have grown lazy. They spend their time making art and music instead of building weapons. They explore space looking for friends, not enemies to defeat. The warriors clicked their approval again. This sounded like an easy victory. "Our scouts tell us they have only a few small ships protecting their world. Most of their vessels are used for trade and research. They have forgotten how to fight. They will surrender quickly when they see our mighty fleet." Vexthar raised his claws high above his head. "Prepare for war. We will show the galaxy that the Keltharian Empire has returned." The aliens cheered and banged their weapons together. They had been waiting so long for this moment. Finally, they would taste victory again. Far away from the alien ship on a space station orbiting Earth, Commander Hyunwoo Kim was having a very normal day. He sat in his comfortable chair, reading reports about cargo ships and mining operations. His job was to make sure everything in Earth space was running smoothly. Most days, nothing exciting happened at all. Hyunwoo was 50 years old with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been a soldier when he was young, but that was during peacetime. He had never actually fought in a real war. Nobody had for a very long time. Next to him sat Communications Officer So Young Park. She was much younger, only 28, with short black hair and a bright smile. She was reading the morning news on her computer when suddenly all the screens in the room started flashing red. "Commander," So Young said, looking confused, "I'm getting a strange message. It's coming from outside our solar system." "What kind of message?" Hyunwoo asked, not looking up from his reports. It's a formal declaration of war." Hyunwoo looked up. "A what?" So Young's eyes were wide as she read from her screen. "It says here that the Keltharian Empire hereby declares war on the human race and demands our immediate surrender. They say they will arrive in our solar system in 3 days to accept our surrender or destroy us all." For a moment the room was completely quiet. Then Hyunwoo started to laugh. It began as a small chuckle but quickly grew into a loud, hearty laugh that filled the entire room. Soon So Young was laughing too, even though she wasn't sure why. Other people working in the room heard the laughter and came over to see what was so funny. When they heard about the war declaration, they all started laughing as well. Within minutes, the entire command center sounded like a party. "Sir," So Young said between giggles, "shouldn't we be worried? They say they have thousands of ships." Hyunwoo wiped tears from his eyes. "Oh, this is rich. Keltharians, really? Get me Admiral Dong Hyun Lee at Fleet Command. He's going to love this, but sir, what if they're serious?" Hyunwoo looked at the young officer with a kind smile. "So Young, how long have you been working here?" 3 years, sir." "And in those 3 years, what kind of ships have you seen humans flying?" So Young thought about it. "Well, mostly research vessels, cargo haulers, passenger ships, mining equipment." "Exactly. And what do you think those ships are really capable of?" So Young paused. She had never really thought about it before. The ships looked peaceful and simple, but she was starting to realize that looks could be misleading. "I don't know." "Sir?" "Well," Hyunwoo said, still smiling, "I think these Keltharians are about to get a very interesting education." Meanwhile, back on the alien flagship, Vexthar was reviewing the final plans for their attack. His fleet of 3,000 ships was the largest the Keltharian Empire had assembled in centuries. Each ship was armed with plasma cannons, fusion torpedoes, and laser weapons. They had enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds. Supreme Commander, one of his officers, said, "We have finished scanning the human defenses. They have 17 ships in their outer solar system. Most appear to be civilian vessels. 17. Vexthar laughed. 17 ships against 3,000? This will be over before it begins. Sir, should we send another message demanding surrender? No, Vexthar replied. Let them see our fleet first. Let them understand how hopeless their situation is. Then they will beg for mercy. The alien commander looked out through the large window of his ship at the stars ahead. Soon those stars would shine on a new Keltharian conquest. The humans would learn what it meant to face a true warrior race. But as the alien fleet moved toward Earth, Vexthar had no idea what was waiting for them. He thought he was hunting soft, peaceful creatures who had forgotten how to fight. He didn't know that humans had spent the last 1,000 years doing something much more dangerous than building weapons. They had been thinking. Back on the space station, Hyunwoo finally managed to stop laughing long enough to make his call to Admiral Lee. When the Admiral's face appeared on the screen, he was already smiling. I heard, Admiral Lee said before Hyunwoo could speak. Keltharians, right? The ones with the big scary ships and the attitude problem. That's them, Hyunwoo replied. They want us to surrender before they arrive. How thoughtful of them to give us warning. Should we tell them what happened to the last aliens who tried this? I think it would spoil the surprise. Admiral Lee nodded. Agreed. Besides, it's been too long since we had a chance to field test the new equipment. The research teams have been complaining that all their theories are getting boring. Should I send out an alert to the civilian ships in the area? Oh yes, definitely. I'm sure Captain Mi Young Kang would be disappointed if she missed this. Her passenger liner has been looking for an excuse to try out its new defensive systems. As the two men talked, neither seemed worried about the approaching alien fleet. If anything, they seemed excited. It had been a very long time since anything interesting had happened in their quiet corner of the galaxy. The Keltharians were expecting to find weak, frightened humans who would beg for mercy when faced with superior firepower. Instead, they were about to encounter something far more dangerous than any warrior race. A species that had turned peace into the ultimate weapon. Admiral Dong-Hyun Lee sat in his office at Fleet Command, a building that looked more like a museum than a military base. The walls were covered with old paintings of space battles from centuries ago, and the furniture was comfortable rather than practical. For 40 years, Dong-Hyun had been in charge of what people jokingly called the Galactic Coast Guard. His job was simple and usually boring. He made sure cargo ships didn't crash into each other, helped rescue miners who got lost in asteroid fields, and settled disputes between trading companies. Real military action was something he had only read about in history books. When Hyunwoo's message came in about the Keltharian War Declaration, Dong-Hyun felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Excitement. He immediately called an emergency meeting with the other military leaders. General Yoon-ji Choi arrived first. She was in charge of planetary defense, which mostly meant making sure space junk didn't fall on cities, and coordinating with local police when smugglers tried to hide illegal goods. Yoon-ji was a small woman with sharp eyes and a quick mind. She had gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and wore a simple uniform without any fancy decorations. Admiral Min Ho-yoon came next. He commanded the Deep Space Fleet, which sounded impressive until you realized it was really just a collection of patrol boats that checked on remote mining stations and research outposts. Minho was tall and thin with a calm personality. He spoke slowly and thought carefully before making decisions. The three leaders gathered around a large table in the conference room. On the table, a holographic display showed the approaching Keltharian fleet. 3,000 ships arranged in a pattern that looked like a blooming flower made of metal and weapons. Well, Dong-Hyun said, looking at the display, this is interesting. Yoon-ji leaned forward to study the alien ships more closely. I haven't seen designs like these since Military Academy. Look at this main battleship. It's exactly the same as the ones we fought 800 years ago during the Contact Wars. Minho pulled up some files from the historical database. Same hull configuration, same weapon placement, even the same engine design. It's like they haven't changed anything at all. The three officers looked at each other and started to smile. While the aliens had been sitting still for 1,000 years, humans had been very busy. Not building bigger weapons or scarier ships, but doing something much more important. They had been learning. Should we tell them what they're really facing? Kunji asked. Tell them what? Dong Hyun replied with a grin. That every cargo ship in our fleet is actually a disguised warship? That our research vessels carry weapons they can't even imagine? That we've been using this peaceful time to invent technologies that would seem like magic to them? Minho shook his head. No, let's not spoil the surprise. Besides, some of our captains have been complaining that their new equipment never gets properly tested. This seems like a perfect opportunity. Donghyun activated the communication system and sent orders to ships throughout the solar system. Most of the messages were short and simple, but they made the recipients very happy. Captain Ji Hoon Park received his orders while eating lunch on his research vessel, the Meridian. The ship was officially studying dark matter and quantum mechanics, which was true but not the whole truth. Hidden inside the Meridian's innocent-looking hull were some of the most advanced weapons humans had ever created. Ji-hoon was a scientist first and a soldier second. He had spent 15 years developing new ways to manipulate gravity and space-time. His weapons didn't just destroy targets. They made targets stop existing entirely. When he read his new orders, he nearly choked on his sandwich. Really, he said to his crew, we finally get to test the gravitic disruptors in actual combat? His assistant, Dr. Dawn Kim, looked up from her computer. About time. I was getting tired of running simulations. Nothing beats real-world data. Taeyun was 26 years old and brilliant. She had invented 3 new types of exotic matter and written papers on theoretical physics that most people couldn't even understand. Her latest project involved weapons that could age matter at incredibly fast rates, turning enemy ships into dust in seconds. Captain Mi Young Kang got her orders while serving afternoon tea to passengers on her ship, the Serenity's Dream. The ship was officially a luxury passenger liner that carried tourists and business travelers between Earth and the outer colonies. What the passengers didn't know was that their comfortable cruise ship could transform into one of the most powerful warships in human space. Ma Young was 55 years old with kind eyes and a grandmother's smile. She had been running passenger services for 20 years, and her guests always felt safe and welcome. They had no idea that their gentle captain was also one of humanity's most skilled military tacticians. Attention passengers, Mi Young announced over the ship's communication system. We may experience some minor turbulence in the next few hours due to a small diplomatic incident. Please remain in your seats and enjoy the show. Dr. Tae-ho Shin was traveling with his 8-year-old daughter Yu Jin. They were going to visit research stations in the outer system. Tae-ho was a theoretical physicist who studied how the universe worked at its most basic level. When he heard the announcement, he understood immediately what was happening. Papa, Yu Jin asked, what's a diplomatic incident? Sometimes, Tae-ho explained gently. Other species make mistakes and try to threaten us. When that happens, we have to teach them why that's not a good idea. Are we going to fight? In a way. But don't worry, it will be over very quickly. Captain Sejun Chang received his orders while loading cargo on his ship, the New Seoul. The ship looked like a simple freight hauler, designed to carry supplies between space stations and mining colonies. But hidden beneath its ordinary appearance were defensive systems that could protect it from almost any attack. Sejun had been a cargo pilot for 12 years. His job was usually quiet and peaceful. Pick up materials from one place, deliver them to another, repeat. He enjoyed the simple life and the beautiful views of space. But he also enjoyed the fact that his cargo ship was actually more advanced than most military vessels from previous centuries. Well, Sejun said to his crew, looks like we get to find out if those new shield harmonics really work. His chief engineer, Jae Min-oh, looked excited. Finally, I've been wanting to test those systems ever since we installed them. The theory says they should be able to absorb unlimited energy, but theory and practice are different things. Captain Woo Jin. Oh commanded a mining vessel called the Prosperity. His ship spent most of its time breaking apart asteroids and extracting valuable metals and minerals. It looked industrial and ugly, covered with drilling equipment and processing machinery. What wasn't obvious was that the same technology used for mining could be easily converted into weapons. Woo Jin had been a miner for 18 years. He enjoyed the honest work and the fact that he was helping build humanity's future. His crew was made up of engineers and technicians who were experts at taking things apart at the molecular level. They had never used their skills for warfare, but the principles were the same. Interesting, Woo Jin said when he read his orders. Youngsu, do you think we can modify the particle beam miners for combat use? Youngsu Park was working on his doctoral dissertation about industrial applications of exotic matter. He looked up from his research with a thoughtful expression. Should be easy, Youngsu replied. Instead of breaking apart rock, we just break apart enemy ships. Same basic process, different target. As the human ships received their orders and began to prepare, the Keltharian fleet continued its approach toward Earth. Supreme Commander Vexthar stood on his bridge, watching the stars grow larger as his ships moved through space at maximum speed. Supreme Commander, his navigation officer reported, we will reach the human solar system in 6 hours. Excellent, Vexthar replied. Have all ships charge their weapons and prepare for battle. I want the humans to see our power immediately when we arrive. Sir, our scouts report that the human ships are not fleeing. They appear to be waiting for us. Vexthar's mandibles clicked with amusement. Foolish creatures. They probably think they can negotiate or appeal to our mercy. They will learn that the Keltharian Empire shows no mercy to inferior species. But as the alien fleet moved closer to Earth, Vexthar began to notice something strange. His sensors showed that the human ships were not just waiting. They were positioning themselves in a very specific pattern. It almost looked like they were setting up some kind of formation. Strange, Vexthar muttered. What are they doing? His tactical officer studied the displays. Unknown, sir. Their ships don't appear to be heavily armed. Most look like civilian vessels. Perhaps they're trying to surrender en masse. Perhaps, Vexthar agreed, but something felt wrong. In all his years of conquest, prey species had never behaved like this. They either fled in terror or begged for mercy. They didn't calmly arrange themselves and wait, unknown to the Keltharian commander. He was about to learn the most important lesson in galactic politics. Never assume that a peaceful species is the same thing as a helpless one. The Keltharian fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system like a storm of metal and fury. 3,000 ships spread out in their traditional death bloom formation, a pattern that had terrorized dozens of worlds during their last period of conquest. Each ship bristled with weapons and their hulls were painted with the symbols of past victories. Supreme Commander Vexthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Void Dominion, feeling the satisfaction of a hunter who had cornered his prey. Through the massive viewing window, he could see the small blue planet that would soon belong to his empire. Sensor report, Vexthar commanded. His sensor officer, a young Keltharian named Tavrex, studied his instruments with growing confusion. Sir, I'm detecting 17 human vessels in the immediate area. They appear to be research ships, cargo haulers, and what looks like a passenger liner. 17 ships? Vexthar's four eyes narrowed. Are you certain? Yes, sir. And sir, they're not running away. They're actually moving toward us. Vexthar clicked his mandibles in annoyance. Scan them for weapons. Tavrex worked at his controls for several minutes. Sir, I'm having trouble getting clear readings. Their ships seem to be generating some kind of interference, but from what I can tell, they don't appear to be heavily armed. Fools, Vexthar growled. They think their peaceful nature will protect them. Signal the fleet. Prepare to demonstrate our power. Perhaps when they see what we're capable of, they'll surrender without forcing us to destroy them all. But before Vexthar could give the order to attack, his communication officer interrupted. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the humans. Put it on screen. The main display showed the bridge of what appeared to be a civilian passenger ship. A middle-aged human woman sat in the captain's chair, casually drinking tea from a delicate cup. She had gentle eyes and a grandmother's smile. Behind her, the bridge looked more like a comfortable living room than a military command center. Hello there, the woman said pleasantly. I'm Captain Mi-Young Kang of the passenger liner Serenity's Dream. You're blocking our shipping lanes. Could you move your fleet about 30 degrees to starboard? We have a scheduled supply run to the mining stations, and you're making us late. For a moment, the Keltharian bridge was completely silent. Vexthar's officers looked at each other in confusion. This wasn't how terrified prey species were supposed to behave. Vexthar struggled to find words. Did she just ask us to move? I think so, sir, his communication officer replied weakly. Vexthar's rage exploded. This is Supreme Commander Vexthar of the Keltharian Empire. We have come to claim this system for our people. Surrender immediately, or we will destroy you all. Mi-Young set down her teacup and looked mildly annoyed. Oh, you're the ones who sent that formal war declaration. Very polite of you to give us advance notice. We don't see much of that old-style diplomacy anymore. She turned to someone off-screen. Jamin, did you file that war declaration with the Historical Society? They collect that sort of thing. Already done, Captain, came a cheerful voice from off-screen. They said it was a lovely example of classical military rhetoric. Vexthar's mandibles clicked furiously. You mock us. Surrender now or face the consequences. Mi-young checked a tablet in her lap. Well, I suppose we have a few minutes. Captain Si-Jun Chang on the New Sol wants to test his new shield systems anyway. Fair warning, though, we're not quite what we used to be. The transmission ended, leaving the Keltharian command bridge in stunned silence. Sir, Tavrek said nervously, what did she mean by not what we used to be? Before Vexthar could answer, his tactical officer reported, Sir, all human ships are powering up their systems. Should we attack? Yes, Vexthar roared. Show them the price of insulting the Keltharian Empire. All ships open fire. The Keltharian fleet unleashed hell. Thousands of plasma cannons lit up space with deadly energy beams. Fusion torpedoes streaked toward the human ships like miniature suns. Laser batteries fired in coordinated patterns designed to overwhelm any defense. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The humans didn't even try to dodge. Captain Si-Jun Chang watched from the bridge of his cargo hauler, the New Sol, as the massive wave of enemy fire approached his ship. To any outside observer, it looked like certain death. The New Sol was a simple freight hauler, designed to carry supplies between space stations. It had no visible weapons and no obvious defenses. Here it comes, Si-Jun said calmly to his crew. Let's see if Chief Engineer Jamin's shield harmonics work as advertised. The plasma beam from a Keltharian dreadnought hit the New Sol dead center. The weapon was powerful enough to vaporize a city, hot enough to melt through any known material. It struck the cargo ship's hull and simply stopped. The energy didn't bounce off or get absorbed. It hit something that existed in folded space-time, a barrier that existed in more dimensions than the Keltharians could understand. The plasma spread out in beautiful rippling patterns like water hitting an invisible wall, its deadly energy harmlessly dispersed. Huh, Si-Jun said, watching the light show outside his window. That actually tickled. On the Keltharian flagship, Vexthar watched in growing horror as his fleet's weapons proved completely useless. Plasma beams struck human ships and simply vanished. Fusion torpedoes exploded harmlessly against shields that shouldn't exist. Laser fire passed through some kind of defensive field that bent light itself. What kind of shields are those? Vexthar demanded. Unknown, sir, his science officer replied in a shaking voice. The energy isn't being deflected or absorbed in any way I recognize. It's as if space itself is refusing to let their ships be damaged. Impossible. Nothing can stop that much firepower. Sir, Tavrex interrupted, one of the human ships is responding. On his research vessel, the Meridian, Captain Ji-Hoon Park decided it was time to demonstrate what humans had learned during their 1,000 years of peace. The Meridian looked like a harmless science ship, covered with sensor arrays and research equipment. What the Keltharians couldn't see was that some of that equipment wasn't designed to study the universe. It was designed to change it. Dr. Da-Un, Ji-Hoon said to his chief scientist, please activate the gravitic lance. Let's show our guests what we've been working on. Da-Un Kim smiled as she worked at her controls. She was proud of her invention, even though she hoped she would never have to use it. The gravitic lance didn't fire energy or matter. It fired pure geometry, shapes that couldn't exist in normal space-time. A section of the Meridian's hull unfolded like a flower, revealing something that hurt to look at directly. It was a weapon that existed in 11 dimensions, though only 3 of them were visible to normal eyes. When it activated, space itself recoiled from what it was being forced to contain. A beam of nothing shot out from the research vessel. It wasn't visible light or energy, but an absence that made reality uncomfortable. The beam touched a Keltharian battlecruiser. The ship didn't explode. It didn't disintegrate. It simply stopped being there. Where a massive warship had existed moments before, there was now a perfectly spherical void that space-time slowly filled with confused particles that weren't sure what they were supposed to be. Gravitic lance functioning perfectly, Da-Un reported cheerfully. The target has been removed from this reality. Should we continue the demonstration? On the passenger liner Serenity's Dream, Captain Mi Young announced to her guests. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be experiencing some minor defensive measures as we respond to this diplomatic incident. Please keep your seatbelts fastened and enjoy the show. Dr. Tai Ho Shin sat with his daughter Yu Jin in the observation lounge, watching the battle through the large windows. The 8-year-old girl was fascinated by the pretty lights outside. Papa, Yu Jin asked, why are the aliens using such old ships? Different species develop at different rates, sweetheart, Tai Ho explained gently. Some get stuck in their ways and never learn to grow beyond what they've always done. But why don't they just learn new things like we do? Because they forgot the most important lesson. Being strong isn't about having big weapons. It's about always asking, what if we tried something different? As they watched, the Serenity's dream began to transform. Hull plates shifted and repositioned themselves. What had looked like a peaceful passenger ship revealed its true nature as weapons emerged from folded, space and comfortable lounges became tactical command centers. But the transformation was so smooth and quiet that the passengers barely noticed. To them, it was just another interesting part of their journey. The Keltharian fleet, meanwhile, was learning that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who doesn't look dangerous at all. What followed could barely be called a battle. It was more like a science experiment with very dramatic results. The Keltharian fleet continued firing everything they had at the human ships. Plasma cannons that could melt through steel struck harmlessly against shields that existed in folded space. Fusion torpedoes that could crack moons exploded uselessly against barriers that bent reality itself. Laser arrays designed to cut through asteroid fields simply passed through defensive fields as if the human ships existed in a different dimension. Supreme Commander Vexthar watched from his bridge as his most powerful weapons proved completely useless. His 4 eyes bulged with disbelief as he saw the impossible happening before him. Status report, he demanded. Sir, his tactical officer said in a trembling voice. We have fired over 10,000 rounds at the human vessels. 0 hits confirmed. 0 damage inflicted. Their defensive systems appear to be impossible. Nothing is impossible, Vexthar roared. Increase power to all weapons. Target their largest ship. The Keltharian fleet focused all their firepower on Captain Mi Young's passenger liner, the Serenity's Dream. Hundreds of energy beams converged on the ship in a display that lit up space like a small star. For a moment, the liner was completely hidden by the brilliant light of the alien weapons. When the light faded, the Serenity's Dream sat unchanged in space. Mi Young could be seen through the bridge windows, still calmly sipping her tea. Interesting light show, Mi Young said over the communication channel. My passengers are quite impressed. Dr. Tai Ho Shin says the energy patterns are fascinating from a physics perspective. She paused to take another sip of tea. Now I believe it's our turn. The passenger liner began to change. What had looked like a peaceful cruise ship revealed its true nature. Hull plates slid apart to reveal weapon systems that the Keltharians couldn't begin to understand. Arrays of crystalline structures emerged from hidden compartments, glowing with soft blue light. Temporal displacement cannons online, Mi Young announced to her crew. Dr. Insu Kim, please demonstrate your daughter's science project. Dr. Insu Kim was a passenger who happened to be one of humanity's leading experts in time manipulation. His 12-year-old daughter, Hyejin, had been working on a school project about accelerated aging in matter. What started as homework had become something much more interesting. Hyejin, Dr. Kim said gently to his daughter, who was sitting next to him in the observation lounge. Would you like to show everyone your experiment? The little girl nodded excitedly and pressed a button on a small device that looked like a toy. A beam of soft light reached out from the Serenity's Dream and touched one of the Keltharian destroyers. The alien ship began to age. Not slowly, but thousands of years in seconds. Its hull turned from black metal to rust-colored dust. Systems that had worked perfectly moments before became ancient relics. The ship fell apart not from damage, but from the simple passage of time compressed into an instant. Excellent work, sweetheart, Dr. Kim said proudly. You'll get an A+ on that project. On the research vessel Meridian, Captain Ji-hoon Park was having a wonderful time testing equipment that had never been used outside of computer simulations. His ship was officially a dark matter research facility, but the same technology that studied exotic matter could also weaponize it. Dr. Da-yun, Ji-hoon said, let's try the quantum dissolution array next. Da-eun Kim activated another of her inventions. This weapon didn't destroy targets by shooting them or blowing them up. Instead, it convinced the quantum particles that made up enemy ships that they would rather be somewhere else. A Keltharian cruiser simply faded away, its matter deciding to explore other dimensions. The ship's crew found themselves floating in space, unharmed but very confused about where their vessel had gone. Quantum dissolution successful, Daun reported. The target has been relocated to a parallel universe where it will probably be much happier. Captain Wu Jin, decided to test his mining equipment in a new way. The Prosperity was designed to break apart asteroids, but the same particle beam systems that could cut through rock could be adjusted for other purposes. Young-Su, Wu Jin said to his research assistant, "What happens if we reverse the polarity on the molecular extractors?" Young-Su Park looked thoughtful. "Well, instead of breaking matter apart, they should compress it into very dense shapes." "Why?" "Just curious." Wu Jin aimed his ship's mining beam at a Keltharian frigate. The beam struck the enemy vessel and began compressing its matter at the atomic level. The frigate shrank smaller and smaller until it became a tiny sphere of incredibly dense material that fell harmlessly into the gravity well of a nearby planet. "Fascinating," Young-Su said, making notes. "I think we just created a miniature neutron star. That should be useful for my dissertation." Throughout the human fleet, similar experiments were taking place. Ships that looked like simple cargo haulers revealed weapons that could manipulate gravity itself. Research vessels demonstrated defensive systems that existed in dimensions the Keltharians couldn't perceive. Even a small maintenance craft showed off engines that could move through folded spacetime. On the Keltharian flagship, panic was beginning to set in. In less than 10 minutes, the humans had destroyed or disabled over 500 ships, without seeming to make any effort at all. Worse, they were doing it with weapons that the Keltharians couldn't understand or defend against. "Sir," Tavrex said in a voice barely above a whisper, "I'm reading massive energy spikes from all human vessels. I think they're just getting started." Vexithar stared at the displays showing his fleet being casually dismantled by creatures he had thought were weak and helpless. Ships that had taken years to build were being erased from existence by weapons that seemed to operate on principles beyond Keltharian science. "What are they?" he whispered. His science officer had been studying the human weapons and trying to understand what was happening. "Sir, I don't think these are weapons in any sense we understand. I think they're scientific instruments that happen to be able to delete matter from reality." "That's impossible." "Sir, they just made one of our destroyers travel backward through time until it became the raw materials it was built from. Then they sent those materials to a different galaxy. I don't think impossible means anything to these creatures." Captain Sejun Chang decided to test his cargo ship's new defensive systems more thoroughly. The new Soul had been taking hits from Keltharian weapons for several minutes, and the shields were performing perfectly. "Jae-min," Sejun said to his chief engineer, "what's our shield efficiency?" "We're actually gaining energy, sir," Jae-min replied with excitement. "The alien weapons are feeding power into our defensive matrix. At this rate, we'll be able to run our engines for a year without refueling." "Excellent. Let's see how much energy we can absorb." Sejun flew his cargo ship directly into the center of the Keltharian formation, where hundreds of enemy vessels concentrated their fire on his ship. The new Soul's shields glowed brighter and brighter as they absorbed energy that should have destroyed it 1,000 times over. "This is fun," Sejun announced over the communication channel. "My ship is practically humming with absorbed energy. I think I'll take a vacation after this and visit some of the outer colonies." On his flagship, Vexthar realized that his mighty empire was being defeated by creatures who treated interstellar warfare as an interesting science experiment. His ships were being destroyed by weapons that the humans seemed to have invented during their lunch breaks. "Sir," his communication officer said, "we're receiving another transmission from the humans." The main screen showed Admiral Dong-Hyun Lee sitting comfortably in his office. Behind him, charts and graphs showed the progress of the battle in real time. "Supreme Commander Vexthar," Admiral Lee said politely, "I think we need to have a conversation." "What?" "What are you people?" Vexthar asked weakly. "We're what happens when a species spends 1,000 years asking what if instead of how do we kill things better," Admiral Lee replied. "You've been fighting the same wars with the same weapons for centuries. We spent that time wondering what would happen if we bent spacetime into interesting shapes." General Yoonji Choi appeared on the screen next to the Admiral. "Your empire covers 12 star systems and hasn't changed its technology in 800 years. Humanity has spread to 600 systems and we reinvent ourselves every Tuesday. But your ships, Vexthar protested. They look so peaceful. Looks can be deceiving, Admiral Min Ho-yoon said, joining the conversation. That research vessel that just deleted one of your cruisers? It's primarily designed to study quantum mechanics. The weapon is just a side project that Dr. Da-eun Kim developed because she was bored. Vexthar looked around at what remained of his fleet. Half his ships were gone, vanished by weapons that operated on principles he couldn't comprehend. The other half were trapped in stasis fields that had frozen them in time, while human scientists studied them like interesting specimens. The mighty Keltharian Empire, terror of the galaxy, had been casually defeated by what amounted to a collection of researchers, tourists, and cargo pilots who treated warfare as an amusing hobby. For the first time in his life, Supreme Commander Vexthar understood what it felt like to be completely outmatched. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted exactly 18 minutes and 37 seconds. When it was over, half the Keltharian fleet had simply ceased to exist, removed from reality by weapons that operated on principles beyond their understanding. The other half found themselves trapped in stasis fields, their ships frozen in time while human scientists examined them like interesting museum pieces. Supreme Commander Vexthar sat on his bridge, staring at the displays that showed the complete destruction of his mighty fleet. Around him, his officers were silent, too shocked to speak. In less than 20 minutes, the most powerful armada the Keltharian Empire had, assembled in centuries, had been casually defeated by 17 human ships that looked like civilian vessels, sir, his communication officer said in a weak voice. We're receiving another transmission from the humans. Admiral Dong-hyun Lee appeared on the main screen, looking relaxed and comfortable in his office chair. He was holding a steaming cup of coffee and seemed completely at ease, as if defeating alien invasion fleets was something he did every day. Supreme Commander, Admiral Lee said politely. I think it's time we had a proper conversation. Vexthar struggled to find words. What are you people? We're what happens when a warrior species decides to grow up, Admiral Lee replied, taking a sip of his coffee. You've been fighting the same wars with the same weapons for millennia. We spent that time asking what if and why not, and how about we try this completely crazy idea that might work. General Yoonji Choi joined the conversation from her office. Your empire spans 12 star systems and hasn't changed its technology in 800 years. Humanity has spread to 600 systems and we reinvent ourselves every generation. We've been using peace as a laboratory, but your ships, Vexthar protested weakly, they look so harmless. Appearances can be very deceiving, Admiral Min Ho-yoon said, appearing on the screen as well. That research vessel you just watched delete one of your cruisers? It's primarily designed to study dark matter fluctuations. The weapon system was just a side project that Dr. Da-eun Kim came up with during her lunch breaks. Captain Woo Jin-oh's face appeared on the communication channel from his mining vessel. My crew was wondering if you'd mind participating in some scientific studies. Young-soo Park has been writing his dissertation on warrior culture stagnation, and you'd make perfect research subjects. The absurdity of the situation finally hit Vexthar completely. His mighty empire, the terror of the galaxy for centuries, had just been defeated by what amounted to a collection of scientists, miners, tourists, and cargo pilots. Ships he had thought were defenseless civilian vessels had revealed themselves to be more advanced than anything in his fleet. What happens now? Vexthar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Now? Admiral Lee leaned back in his chair. Now you have a choice. You can go home, think about what you've learned today, and maybe consider joining the galactic community as something other than a conquering army. Or what? Or we let Dr. In-soo Kim's daughter continue practicing her temporal mechanics homework on your fleet. Hee-jin has been working on a project that ages matter at accelerated rates. Very educational, and she could use the extra credit. Vexthar looked around his bridge at his demoralized crew. These were warriors who had dreamed of glorious battle and conquest. Instead, they had faced the reality that they were obsolete relics from a bygone age, trying to threaten a civilization that had moved so far beyond warfare that they treated it as a minor inconvenience. Vexthar swallowed his pride, something he had never thought possible. We withdraw. Excellent choice, Admiral Lee nodded approvingly. Dr. Sunmi Park from our cultural exchange program will be in touch with you soon. She's got some wonderful ideas about helping your people transition to a more productive role in galactic civilization. Fair warning, though, she's very enthusiastic about rehabilitation projects. As the transmission ended, Vexthar gave the order for the surviving Keltharian ships to retreat. The once mighty fleet limped away from Earth's solar system, their hulls scarred not by battle damage, but by the humiliating knowledge that they had been completely outmatched by creatures they had thought were weak. The human ships, meanwhile, returned to their normal activities as if nothing unusual had happened. Captain Mi Young's passenger liner resumed its course to the outer colonies, with her guests excitedly discussing the light show they had witnessed. The research vessels went back to studying quantum phenomena and dark matter. The mining ships returned to their asteroid claims. The cargo haulers continued their supply runs. On Earth, news of the war became a brief entertainment story that most people watched while eating breakfast. The general reaction was amusement rather than concern. Social media filled with jokes about aliens who were still using technology from the Stone Age. Comedy shows made fun of the Keltharians' dramatic war declaration. Most humans were more interested in the upcoming Galactic Arts Festival, where species from across the galaxy would showcase their culture and creativity. There was also excitement about the latest breakthrough in consciousness, transfer technology that would allow people to experience life from completely different perspectives. Dr. Da-Yun Kim submitted her paper on applied gravitational weaponry to the Journal of Theoretical Physics with a note that read, "Practical applications accidentally tested during minor diplomatic incident. Results exceeded all expectations. Request additional funding for further research into exotic matter manipulation." Captain Ji-Hoon Park returned to his dark matter studies, but found himself thinking about the implications of his weapons. He decided to write a proposal for converting the technology into tools for space construction and terraforming. If you could remove matter from reality, you could probably add matter to it as well. Dr. Hye-Jin Kim, the 12-year-old whose science project had aged an enemy destroyer into dust, received an A+ on her assignment and a recommendation to advance to more challenging physics courses. Her teacher noted that her work showed exceptional creativity and practical applications of temporal theory. 6 months later, the first group of Keltharian cultural exchange students arrived on Earth. They were young, aliens who wanted to understand how a species could become so powerful by seemingly abandoning the very concept of power itself. The students were amazed by human cities where former soldiers worked as artists and teachers. They visited universities where military technology was developed by people who had never fired a weapon in anger. They attended concerts where music was performed by composers from dozens of different species. One young Keltharian named Kixtel spent a semester studying with Dr. Tae-Ho Shin, learning about theoretical physics and the human approach to problem solving. "I don't understand," Kixtel said during one of their discussions. "How did you become so advanced without conquest? How did you develop such powerful weapons without a warrior culture?" Dr. Shin smiled gently. "We learned that the strongest weapon is curiosity. The best defense is knowledge. And the greatest victory is when your former enemies become your friends. But your ships, your weapons, they're more powerful than anything we ever imagined." "That's because we never stopped imagining," Dr. Shin replied. "Every human child grows up asking what if and why not and how can we make this better. When you spend 1,000 years doing that, you end up with some very interesting answers." Across the galaxy, other warrior empires quietly canceled their plans for conquest. Word had spread quickly about what happened to the Keltharians. Species that had spent centuries building bigger weapons and scarier ships suddenly found themselves wondering if they were approaching the problem from the wrong direction. The Zephyrian battle lords, who had been planning to challenge human space for decades, decided instead to send diplomatic envoys. The Thorian war clans, famous for their planet-cracking ships, quietly converted their fleets to mining and construction vessels. The Xerian Empire, which had ruled through fear for millennia, began sending their young people to human universities to study advanced technology and peaceful cooperation. Dr. Sunmi Park, the cultural exchange specialist who had been assigned to help the Keltharians, found herself overwhelmed with requests from other species wanting to learn the human approach to civilization. She had to hire an entire team of assistants just to handle all the applications. "It's remarkable," she said to Admiral Lee during one of their meetings. "They all want to know the same thing. How did we become so powerful by giving up the idea of power?" "Simple," Admiral Lee replied with a smile. We realize that the universe is a much more interesting place when you're trying to understand it rather than conquer it. And in the depths of space, human ships continued their work of exploration and discovery, carrying with them the knowledge that sometimes the greatest strength comes from choosing not to use it. They had learned that in a galaxy full of warriors, the most dangerous thing you could be was a species that had outgrown the need for war. The 1,000-year peace had ended, but it had been replaced by something even better. A 1,000-year education in why peace was the most powerful force in the universe.